A new Iowa ag-gag law is sparking a travel boycott and a protest, in case you were planning on going to Iowa on spring break. Warning, this might cause you to have some images disturbing in your mind as we view. The animal rights group Mercy for Animals is coming out against a new law, which they say prevents the exposure of abuse taking place in animal agriculture. Now, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds signed the bill, which makes it a crime for advocacy groups to go undercover and document conditions at meatpacking plants, livestock facilities, and other agricultural operations. Now, proponents of this law and similar laws say they protect farmers and food supplies. But opponents claim they infringe on free speech, consumer protection, and animal welfare. So to learn more, we're joined by David Matulewicz-Crowley, Legal Advocacy Counsel for Mercy for Animals. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we know a slaughterhouse is not a pretty sight, no matter what you're talking about, obviously. But now, what is so wrong with having cameras, whether it's undercover or open cameras, to actually document that these animals are being not only slaughtered humanely, but that they're being slaughtered in a way that also is safe for the food that they produce that eventually Americans and others are going to eat?
Well, that's exactly right, and that's exactly why these industries want to pass these laws that'll prevent undercover investigations of factory farms. A lot of people like to believe that their food comes from old McDonald's farm and that there's green grass and sunshine, and what these undercover investigations do is they show that's frequently not the reality. In 2011, our organization went undercover at Iowa Select Farms, and the conditions that we documented there were horrible. There were sows kept in crates so small they were unable to lie down for the majority of their lives comfortably. There were workers who were documented throwing piglets across the room, and this is one of the largest pork manufacturers in the United States. So this is the reality of how food is often made.
Well, I think a lot of the opponents would say on this one, the proponents of this bill would say, well, this can be used and manipulated that you go after one farm, putting them out of a business or having them boycotted because their competition said that they wanted it done. How can you make sure that, and that's the issue, is when it comes to transparency, why do we not have transparency across the board instead of just going undercover at one versus the other? How does your organization choose which farm to go under?
You know, that's an excellent point, and we would absolutely love it if there were transparency across the board at all farms. And that's exactly the sort of thing that we conveyed to the legislature of Iowa. We said, if you really want to address this problem, if you want to address animal abuse, worker safety, and the food systems, you should be working with organizations like our organization in order to address those things, create transparency, and prevent that. Instead, what they did is they enacted this ag-gag law that criminalizes the act of recording at these facilities.
That's just, it's shaking my head at this, because I would think the ultimate safety of your food and your product would be the goal of our politicians that are elected. But that shows a bigger role, even outside of Iowa, of big ag. How much of a role did the big ag and all the organizations behind it have in pushing this bill? And is it going to possibly be seen as a federal bill eventually?
The agricultural industry is absolutely huge in regards to pushing these bills. When you look at the specific case of Iowa, the very farm that we investigated in 2011, Iowa Select Farms, they were a lobbyist. They had a lobbyist on record supporting this bill. When you look at the governor, Kim Reynolds, who signed this bill into law, she received $175,000 from the spouse of the owner of Iowa Select Farms. So agricultural interests play a huge role in a number of states, and in particular in Iowa, where they produce 25% of the pork products in the United States and almost a fifth of the eggs that are produced in the United States.
Well, that's the thing, is they do have a big influence. I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that people, every day we go through and we hear a different food recall that happens, or a different grocery store recalling lines, or even I remember the pedigree with the dog food problem that happened. Do you think if we had complete transparency and cameras were allowed in all of these food processing plants, whoever they are meant to feed, do you think we'd be able to cut down on some of the unsafe food that we continuously have on our shelves that get recalled?
Oh, absolutely. And obviously, you'll never be able to have a perfect solution, and transparency is only one part of that process. But with greater transparency, we would be able to avoid problems like this. When you look at what happened in response to our 2011 investigation, you had grocery chains and distributors who refused to do business because the practices that we uncovered were so alarming. And
Right.
that's why these investigations are so important, and that's why it's important to make sure that undercover investigators are allowed to review these facilities.
Well, transparency, I believe, is always a good thing, whether you're talking about food or government or both in your case. Thank you for following up on this.
And thank you for having me.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.